Welcome to the Microscopists, a bite-sized bio podcast, hosted by Peter O'Toole, sponsored by Zeiss Microscopy. Today on the Microscopists.
This week on the Microscopists, I talk to Dame Ottoline Leyser, where we discover how she balances her full-time job running UK research and innovation while still having a research lab.
I have a kind of sanity check, Ottoline sanity check lab meeting once a month with everybody so I can keep up.
Where does she regret leaving the lab?
It's just such a joy, research, which is, it's what draws you in and keeps you there, and it's really exciting. And so to step away from that is quite a wrench. The
dark side of academia.
I mean, research is terrifying. You have absolutely no idea what you're going to find out.
And the difficulties of the pandemic for researchers.
Early career researchers have a lot of stress and anxiety.
I just had to ask her, what is it that she misses most about York?
I also miss, Betty's Fat Rascals.
All in this episode of the Microscopists. Hi, I'm Peter O'Toole, and today on the Microscopist, I'm joined by Ottoline Leyser, or should I say Dame Leyser now?
No, don't say that.
Also, it's been ages since I've seen you, and actually, the first thing I noticed, you've grown your hair.
I have grown my hair. This is an exciting lockdown experiment that was forced upon me by inability to access a hairdresser, but I'm quite enjoying it.
You didn't trust any of your family to cut your hair then?
I've mostly been by myself in lockdown, so I haven't had that choice.
I've been fortunate. I've got a son that will cut my hair, so after a bit of teaching, but he's actually pretty good.
All kinds of family ties are being well tested by these kinds of lockdown experiences.
So actually a lot has happened since you were at York with ourselves. Indeed. Not only did you become Dame Leyser, but you also became Chief Executive of UKRI, which is a huge position. So I guess some listeners and viewers won't know what UKRI is and what the Chief Executive does. In fact, I don't know what the Chief Executive does, but sits at home by the looks of it. So go on. Have a brief overview of that, just to give a feel.
Yeah, so UKRI is UK Research and Innovation. That's what it stands for. And it is a relatively new organisation. It's coming up to 3 years old now, that brings together the 7 disciplinary research councils and Innovate UK, which is the UK's innovation agency, and Research England, which is an organisation that funds the block grants into into English universities. It works very closely in collaboration with the equivalents in the devolved administrations. And so what UKRI does is bring together all of that, which collectively represents about 60% of the public sector spend on research and innovation under one organisation. And it was formed as a result of the recommendations of a review that was led by Sir Paul Nurse, that argued that in bringing together all of these organisations, one would have a much better opportunity to tackle all kinds of quite important issues facing research and innovation, one being interdisciplinarity and how you really get the most out of working together right across all of those disciplines and also all of those research sectors, so the public and private sector and third sector also. And the other being how you build a really strong interface between the research and innovation system and government, where both it's important to have that interface so that government's keen on funding research and innovation, but also research and innovation has an awful lot to offer to support policy making, both policy for science and science for policy, where science is broad sense.
I think you said that before. That seemed very well rehearsed.
I have been doing this job for just over 6 months, and I've been doing an awful lot of introductory type meetings. And one of the first questions always is,
what is? I was interested in interdisciplinarity. See, I really struggle with that word, interdisciplinarity across the sciences. And actually, a lot of people that are on the previous chats that I've been talking to actually some of them are physicists, chemists, biologists, and actually have almost, some of them have completely discipline hopped and changed and use those skills, and they're all really highly successful. So there's a lot to be said for that ability to hop across. But it's got to be a very big challenge when you've got the independent groups still working, of how to actually get them to talk more, or to be more fluid in their funding and their vision.
That's an interesting question, in that, I mean, interdisciplinarity is, as you say, quite fundamental in research these days. An awful lot of the really interesting questions are at disciplinary boundaries, or where there are really core questions to very defined disciplines. You nonetheless need all kinds of expertise from other disciplines to help you address them. So at some level, you know, I came to my thinking about a lot of these things through my life as a developmental biologist before I took this job on. And certainly for many years, I've been working with computational modelers, because developmental biology is a kind of quintessential multi-scale feedback laden system, and to understand it at all, you have to have formal modeling. So I've been working in that way for a long time, and indeed immediately before taking this job, I was working in an institute in the University of Cambridge, which was explicitly about bringing those skills from physical sciences into developmental biology. So it's something that's happening all over the place. And, you know, you're a microscopist. Microscopy has always been very much on the boundaries of all of the sciences. You need the kind of, in a different sort of way, because you're addressing questions in a variety of different disciplines, but you're also having to build kit that through physics delivers your ability to interact with those systems in ways that you can then make sense of. So lots of very exciting questions in interdisciplinarity of that sort. And then there's the kind of flip side to it, which is where you've got some big societal problem like aging or something, and it's really obvious that if you're going to do anything about that, you have to bring together people from all kinds of different directions. And the UKRI is exciting because it makes it much easier to do both of those kinds of interdisciplinarity. It makes it easier for somebody who is really, you know, driven by some question that's straightforwardly within a discipline to access funding that might be from a different research council, for example. So you could, writing those collaborative grants with people from different disciplines in principle is easier when there's better interactions between the councils, but also it's been possible to put in place these kind of challenge-led programs where you can kind of draw in the expertise from across all of those different disciplines to face particular questions.
So you mentioned there that you are, I presume you are still director of the Sainsbury's laboratories, or not anymore?
No, this job is pretty much a full-time job. I do still have a research group in the Sainsbury lab, and they're being very patient with me in my the amount of time I have to interact with them. But I'm very pleased still to have that contact with the science.
So how do you actually balance that? Because, as you say, it's an all-consuming job. It's a new, UKRI is new, so it needs probably even more effort. It's not just like moving the ship. You've got to actually you've got to develop the ship. You've got to build around it. How do you actually balance, and how do your lab group think about that? How much time do you get to spend with them? Are they getting enough of your time? They're going to listen to this, so you better give the right answer.
Well, so I obviously try to put in place some wider interactions for them. The Sainsbury lab is an incredibly collaborative environment, so and colleagues very happy to step in and get involved with the projects that were ongoing in my group. And I have a kind of sanity check, Ottoline sanity check lab meeting once a month with everybody, so I can keep up. And then I talk to them either by email or Zoom or whatever, as and when. But it's a transition, essentially. I mean, this, as I say, running UKRI is more than a full-time job.
It's probably too early to ask if you regret moving out of the lab and to be more full on with the admin. I think it'd be a very unfair question to ask if it was it the right step?
Yes. You know, of course, I regret moving out of the lab, and I think I will. You know, who knows what the future holds? And I'm doing this job for 5 years, and maybe after that I shall go fully back into the lab. But I think most people who came into research, it's just such a joy, research, which is, you know, it's what draws you in and keeps you there, and it's really exciting. And so to step away from that is quite a wrench in a whole variety of ways. But I suppose what happens progressively is well, certainly for me, I've felt that gradually I could make more of a contribution by stepping away from the bench gradually to doing the various other things I've done over the years. So I was director of this institute in Cambridge, and really enjoying working with all the wonderful people there to try to make the kind of environment where I think the best research happens, because it's about the people and it's about the research. It's not about, you know, ticking delivery boxes or trying to get your paper published in a particular journal. It's about the questions you're trying to answer, and it's about the challenge of doing that, and the excitement of working with people who think about things differently and bringing your ideas together. Yeah, there's all kinds of really fantastic things about research and how you do it in a really joyful way, and that's what I think. That's how I think it should be, and that's how I think the most exciting discoveries get made. And I'm really keen to try to create a research and innovation system where that creativity, that kind of engagement is so central to it that we really can make some progress, understand the world, make things better for people, all that stuff.
So on that very note, one of the things you've championed is equality and diversity in the workplace. And that's not just gender or race, but it's equality across the workforce. I think the infrastructure and appreciating that wider infrastructure. And actually, I can thank you. I certainly didn't have a classic academic job at York. I remember going for my first BBSRC grant for a piece of equipment, for which you encouraged me to lead on that. And actually, you were a fantastic support to myself. You were my go-to person when I had my grant applications to sanity check and rewrite it completely, because as you tell me, it was rubbish if it was. And guide me very well in the right direction. But you supported a non-classic academic to apply for grant funding directly. And that still, I don't think, is the case everywhere, even in the UK. Certainly across the world, that is not the case in many countries. And I think the UK has been really fleet-footed, pragmatic, and does allow it. But there's still people in more technical associated roles that cannot apply for grants, for equipment, when they are the people who are going to be running it. They're the experts. So, you know, the technician's commitment, hidden ref. Have you got any thoughts or comments that I think would be good for people to hear of just, I think, how the UK should be working in this area?
So, you know, there are a number of ways into answering that question. You started it in the context of diversity and inclusion. I think those two things are absolutely crucial in a successful research and innovation endeavor. Diversity, because you need a whole bunch of different ideas, different people with different backgrounds, different ways of thinking about things. They bring different stuff into the work environment, to the questions that you're trying to answer, and definitely different skills, different interests, all of those things. If you can really bring all of those things together and work together in a way that's properly engaged and really capturing the benefit of all of those differences, then I think that's how you get to make progress. And I think that absolutely includes all of the people that you need to make the make the thing work. And that absolutely is the high-end equipment and the extraordinary skills that people like you bring in. But actually, I definitely include, you know, well, at York, Jenny giving tea, cookies, and all of that kind of stuff.
I'm still doing it, still there.
Brilliant. I mean, those people are just a crucial part of the system. Everybody is building an environment where it's possible to step into the unknown. I mean, research is terrifying. You have absolutely no idea what you're going to find out. It might be nothing. It might the question that you're kind of desperate to answer might be unanswerable. The thing you've invested years in as your kind of best hope to answer it might just fail completely. All of those things, and it's quite frightening to go there. And so, creating an environment where you go there with people who are helping and supporting you to do it, I think is definitely the way to go. And it allows you to go to take more risks than you would have been able to take by yourself. And it allows you to do it with people. And so it's a community experience, which I think is incredibly helpful and supportive through all the ups and downs and the successes and failures that research brings. So I think it's all part of a really important and you know, goal to create this kind of shared endeavor. And then, you know, that maps onto a much broader agenda, which is to do with trying to break down the barriers between research and innovation and the whole of the rest of society, because it does have this reputation as being a kind of thing done by boffins in shiny labs or, you know, dusty libraries or whatever. And that's just not how it is. And being really sure to highlight the extraordinary contribution of everybody in the system, I think, is one of the ways one can help to shift the whole focus or the whole kind of concept of what research and innovation is, so that everybody can feel that they can join in. Anyone who wants to contribute can contribute, and everybody can benefit.
I guess that's a modern way of thinking, but there's still not so modern ways of thinking within it, and actually getting the acknowledgements out there can still be a challenge.
Yeah.
Especially on the technical side. I think I've been spoiled. In York, I came from Essex, which is pretty good. I went to York, which I think is just outstanding in its support and diversity. But that's not, as I say, it's not the case everywhere. So the more that it's championed, the better it will be. And thinking of diversity, what about, you said, we're not just in our ivory towers, we're not just boffins that are working there. So what do you do outside of work?
What do I do outside of work? Gosh, I like to walk. Long walks, one of my favorite things, with interesting people, even better.
Is that walking or hiking?
Walking. I mean, I'm very happy to walk 20 miles. I don't know what the difference between walking and hiking is.
I guess it's mostly on the flat if you're mostly Cambridge based anyway.
Cambridge,
where are you based at the moment?
Opportunity to walk up hills, but
where are you based at the moment?
So when I took the UKRI job, the head office for UKRI is in London, and so I have been renting a place on the South Bank for the week. And my plan was to commute up and down weekly, and I did that for a little bit, but then at various points I've been locked at one end of the other, or the other of that commute. So it's a little bit awkward, but yeah. So right now I'm in my London flat.
How have you found being isolated from the family? Because obviously you need your support network, I guess just some normality. So how have you coped with that?
It's not entirely straightforward, but it's doable. Yeah, I mean, without getting, I don't know, maybe you want me to get too deep into my personal life. My husband died 6 years ago now, and I have 2 grown-up children, and actually at the beginning of lockdown they were both in Cambridge and I was in Cambridge, so I saw a fair amount of them then. But anyhow, recently have a new relationship, if you and he lives in London, so he's been around. We're in a bubble, and so that's helpful. But more generally, yeah, I think, you know, like everybody, this whole pandemic experience is really difficult. It's just very hard for people in so many ways. So many of the things you build your life around are not there, destabilized, uncertain, and I think that's tricky. And it's particularly, well, it's tricky across all walks of life, but the research system, as I've said, is inherently uncertain, both in terms of what you're doing as a researcher, but also the kind of career structure is very unstable. Early career researchers have a lot of stress and anxiety, and I think this has very much amplified that, to have all the normal stresses and anxieties of being a researcher, and then added on top of that all the destabilizations of the pandemic. It's been really hard for people.
So I just coming back to your husband, if you don't mind, just for a minute, because actually I know you've actually given him a lot of credit for your career.
Yeah.
So would you like to, a lot of people won't appreciate that side of it. And just actually, you would not be who you are today without him, I don't think. I think
absolutely not. He was a wonderful man. We met as undergraduates on a field trip in Slapton, and we married straight out of undergraduate. And I was very fortunate to meet him so soon in my life. And he was a freelance writer. And so he was A, completely mobile, and B, worked from home. And from my point of view, that was fantastic, because if you're following a research career, again, you know, particularly I worked in plant developmental biology, and it's not a huge field. And so the places you would want to train, the places you would want to work, all of those things are quite constrained. And so having the freedom to plot that course through my career, because he was so movable and flexible, made things an awful lot easier than I know for a lot of people. It's very common because researchers work so much in the lab at that stage in their lives, for researchers to marry other researchers, and then you're trying to juggle those two careers, and it's complicated. So I was definitely very fortunate to have that extreme flexibility in Stephen. And he, as I say, worked from home, and so when we had kids, he was also the kind of primary childcare provider, if you want to put it that way. And yeah, it worked wonderfully for all of us.
So so moving from that, is it still, do you think it's still as difficult to develop a career if you also have to look after children, or balance that? Are things getting better?
Well, so I mean, I always felt it was a huge help because I think, you know, that my kids are wonderful, and it's so easy to get so kind of deeply sucked into your work that you kind of never leave it. And coming home from a day at work to the wonderful things that are children and all of the things they're interested in, and all of the stuff you get up to being with them, it's a tremendous kind of it provides a kind of depth to your life, I think, if you're lucky enough to have kids, that you just wouldn't get otherwise. And I think, you know, being a mother made me a better scientist, and being a scientist made me a better mother. Just having those two passions together, I've always felt it was very complementary. I've always been very frustrated by the work-life balance expression, because it implies that there's your work over here and your life over here, and somehow you know, there's one of me. and I'm having a life, and it includes some science, and it includes a whole bunch of other stuff too, and it's who I am, and that's important, I think.
So I'm changing tack completely. What has been the greatest challenge you've had in the work environment, and how have you overcome that challenge?
Goodness.
Is that where you are now?
Yeah, I guess so. At some level, it's different challenges. There's a whole range of different sorts of challenges, and so, you know.
So have you ever had a moment in your career where you thought, "Good grief, I'm really struggling at this moment, and is it for me? Is it not for me?"
I've had plenty of really struggling moments, but I guess I respond to really struggling moments by why am I struggling? What's working? What's not working? How can I get through this, round this, over this, under this, whatever it takes? And it's always been for me to, I guess I've always felt quite fortunate in a way in having a reasonably clear idea about what I was actually trying to do. And I think if you've got that front and center, and even when you're, you know, hitting walls, which you do all the time, it's easier to say to yourself, okay, you know, this is not working, but I do still want this, the thing I'm trying to do. I still would like to try to do that. How can I achieve that through a different route, for example? And I think that's really, that's the thing that has always helped me through those difficult times, having a idea what I'm trying to get out of it, or what I'm trying to achieve. And, you know, some of that's how do plants grow, but some of that's, yeah, how do I create the kind of environment where people are having a really fulfilling time doing research and innovation? That's a kind of abiding question that I've had for a very long time. And why I moved into this job was because I hope I can make a difference and, you know, support that kind of goal. And of course there are challenges, but if it wasn't challenging, then someone would have fixed it all already. So
yeah. Life would be boring, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Without the challenges. So you moved around quite a lot in your career as well. So you've been to Cambridge, you then went over to USA, I think, and then came back to York. That was a good decision, by the way. and then back to Cambridge and left us. Cheers. And now working down in London. So I'm going to ask you, what was better place to work, USA or UK?
Well, one of the things I've always said about moving around is you live in different places, and different places have different advantages and disadvantages, and good stuff and bad stuff. And there's this really bizarre kind of human failing, I think, that you always notice the things that work better in the place that you're not, because because you're trying to do something. I mean, whatever it might be, a kind of trivial thing or a big thing or whatever, and you know that in the place where you were before it was really easy, and now it's a real pain. And so there's a real danger of going around feeling endlessly dissatisfied because this, that, or the other work better in this, that, or the other place. I view a lot of these things as they're kind of holistic. If you want, there are wonderful things about the US, and there are wonderful things about the UK, and most of them come with flip sides that are less good. And it is simply not possible to have all the wonderful things about the USA and all the wonderful things about the UK in one place, because they're two sides of the same coin. And I think that's an important thing to hold on to. Otherwise, you're always just grumpy.
I can see why you're chief exec of UK. That's a very political answer. You didn't give an answer. You sat on the fence perfectly. So okay, so I'm going to reword the next question. Which you prefer, okay, York or Cambridge? I'm going to ask you, what do you miss about York?
Ooh, what do I miss about York? Again, I could answer that on all kinds of levels. The department was, I loved the department in York. I loved the university. I loved the community. It was, very much, a lot of these ideas I have about how you build that kind of creative, positive research environment, I think I learned in York. And so all of those things. Cambridge as a university is much bigger, and it works in a different way, and so you can't, it just can't be York. It can't be agile and easy in the way that York is. But on the other hand, it's much bigger, and it's got all kinds of, a huge range of different people with extraordinary diversity of opportunity, I guess, to form. So so I miss the agility of the scale and the kind of humanity of the scale of York, and then I also miss Betty's Fat Rascals.
So on mail order now.
Yeah, it's not the same though, is it?
so which one had the best microscopy suite, by the way?
Oh well, I'm sorry.
Oh no way! You haven't seen what we have now. That's why.
Well, that's true. I'm not up to date, but the Sainsbury lab had an astonishing microscopy suite.
Yeah, and you never asked me to come and run it.
An astonishing microscopy suite.
You never came to ask me to run it. Anyway, so when you're at home in the evening, what would you rather do? Read a book or watch TV, if you get time?
Read a book.
And what sort of fact fiction?
So for many years, I read kind of rather sort of golden era detective novels. They're just relaxing, safe, entertaining, all of those things. But I kind of got bored of those a few years ago, and I'm now sort of randomly hopping about between different things depending on what takes my fancy. I'm currently doing Somerset Maugham short stories.
Okay. And if you were to, would you rather get a takeaway or cook at home? I'd
rather cook, but I don't get a huge amount of time to do that. I'd rather eat. It's another thing that was actually quite a big adjustment after, the kids grew up, and then fairly shortly after that, my husband died. And so I went from, family eating to me. And so I used to cook at weekends and then eat it in bits during the week. That's quite successful. But now actually even that's quite a challenge time-wise. So I'm sort of, low effort cooking is what I do now.
I realise we're nearly out of time because your time's very precious, and thank you for taking it with us. I'd like to ask, what do you think is the next big steps in science that we'll see?
The next big steps in science. Ooh.
It's very broad, isn't it? Sorry.
I'm interested. I mean, one of the things that I think is really interesting. So, obviously, Google DeepMind, just AlphaFold AI on protein folding. I'm interested in explainable AI. I'm interested in whether you can use AI to understand things better. So just using AI to tell you how this protein folds is great, major transformation, but I want to understand how things work, not just be able to predict or reproduce. And that becomes then very interesting because it's not, that's to me is the kind of next big thing in AI, is being able to unpick what it's done afterwards and really use it to generate intuition as well as to generate answers, which of course is super powerful and really important. But I think the essence of science is about understanding, not just about prediction.
So that's where we should all be building relations internally. It's a big challenge, isn't it, actually, getting computer scientists, mathematicians to switch to biology?
Oh, I don't know, actually.
There are some that are there, but we need more.
We do.
And
We need
that's
lots of people to switch. We need switching to happen. I think that moving about between domains, between disciplines, between ideas is really something that I'm very keen that should be supported and incentivized and celebrated in the system.
So if you're a mathematician or computer scientist watching or listening, think about going into biology, because we need your help. I think that's the message that's quite clearly there. It's team effort, and we need every discipline, really. And by the way, I remember Jenny from my first day, my interview day, very welcoming and still always welcoming. So serving my sandwich that day was really good. Anyway, it is time, I'm afraid. I know that you have to go. It's been a real pleasure, Ottoline. We need to catch up properly. Again.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry. I'm going to come to York. You're going to buy me a fat rascal.
I will definitely do that. And I will show you now that we've got the best microscopy suite as well.
Okay.
So thank you for watching the Microscopists today. Thank you, Ottoline, for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and go back and actually see some of the other clips. Oh, I should say, actually, there's one bite with Alison North as well, who I believe was actually a peer with you at Cambridge during your
undergraduate with me a long time ago now.
Yes. So I forgot. Yeah. Alison says hello, by the way. So anyway, thank you, everyone, and hopefully see you soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Microscopists, a bite-sized bio podcast sponsored by Zeiss Microscopy. To view all audio and video recordings from this series, please visit bitesizebio.com/the-microscopists.